It is currently the 20th of December, and I thought it was time to film my favourite books of the year. Okay, so I read a total of 30 books, which for me was really good because I think my goal was 25. Yeah, so I wanted to read 25 and I read 30, and I don't think I've ever went over my reading goal. I think I've always been like just under it, so I'm very happy that I actually went over, and there were some really good books this year. So I thought I'm going to chat about them, and some of these I've already talked about like in a few videos because obviously there were books that I really liked, or they were series, so I was reading them for kind of a long time, but they are still my favourite books. So I'm going to quickly cover the ones I've already talked about, but yeah, let's get into it. Okay, we're starting off with The Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare. If you do not know, this is one of her series in her many series in the Shadowhunter world. This series specifically follows the kids of the Shadowhunters we read in Infernal Devices, and so it's just kind of like dives straight into this kind of like aristocratic kind of world of Shadowhunters, where we've got multiple families and then all the kids are like have grown up together, and it was just such a fun like world to be in, because obviously I've read Mortal Instruments and I've read Infernal Devices, and now we're going into the Shadowhunter world again, but everyone's already grown up in this world. Like, we're not discovering the Shadowhunters for the first time, we're not understanding the lore, it's already established, and that was so much fun. Not to mention the characters, chef's kiss. They were all just, the friendships were strong. So we've got like the Merry Thieves, which are like the four main boys, and then we've got Cordelia and Lucy, who are like parabatai to be, and just the whole, and then we've got some of the older kids as well, so they're a little bit older, like Thomas and etc. I won't go into it, but they all just mesh so well together. They all each have their own plot, their own story, but then we have distinct couples as well, and they have their own drama, but it works so well together, and it's just classic Cassandra Clare, you know? So yeah, really enjoyed it. I also really liked her main character, Cordelia. I loved how she was like this really tan, like Persian girl, but she had red hair. Because obviously Cassandra Clare is not going to make a main character who doesn't have red hair. She could be my skin tone, she's having red hair. So that was really funny. Yeah, what else? Oh, I love that it was set in like, I don't know if I already said this, I loved that it was set in like late 1800s London, and so we're kind of, there's a lot of nods to etiquette and like courting. I mean, obviously the romances and that were like strong A+, and there is an appearance from one of my favourite characters that Cassandra Clare loves to mention, and that's Lilith, so yeah. Second series, I guess, I'm grouping the series as one thing. I'm not going to go through each book, but yeah, the second series, which was also a trilogy, was the Emily Wilde series. I think this must be like popular in book talk because I know everyone was speaking about the first one and then obviously subsequently the rest of them. This series, I've talked about this before, so I'll quickly go through it, but this series was one of my ultimate favorites. It's like this cozy light academia fantasy. So they follow this professor, an academic, Emily Wilde, and she is a professor of fairies. So she's part of this Cambridge department, Dryadology department in Cambridge, and the first book is her going on like a field trip to do research about this species of fae that's very hard to find. There's not a lot of information on them, and so it's her going on this field trip to collect data and do research, and along the way she has to kind of work with her rival, her academic rival, Wendell Bumblebee, and they go on so many adventures and they meet so many different people. And the reason I loved this series so much is the way the fairies are kind of described in this world is they kind of have a range of like, there's fairies that are almost animal-like. like they straight up could be a wild animal. But then we also have fae that are pretty much human. So there's this huge range of how fairies are in this world, and we get exposed to so many different species of fae, and they're also unique and interesting, like straight up dangerous, evil. The human ones are kind of like twisted in their own way, but it's still like got that very classic fantasy feel of like when you go into the fae realm, it's kind of like this intoxicating, beautiful realm, and yeah, it's just got all the best bits of fantasy. There's a romance, but yeah, it's just so like comforting and whimsical and woodland, magical forest vibes. But the actual banter and the characters themselves are also really strong, and I liked that the plot line really develops. Like book 1, 2, and 3 build on top of each other, and I'm pretty sure characters that we got introduced in book 1 are still mentioned in book 3. Oh, and she has the cutest freaking dog in this book, and that's probably the best part, so yeah. The next book is If We Were Villains by ML Rio. Oh my god. Okay, this was like going into winter. I was really wanting to read Dark Academia, so I kept seeing this book like pop up in loads of different lists and like just saying it was like the best of the best. So I was like, okay, I'll read it. And I did, and oh my god, it is so Dark Academia coded. Like the atmosphere is like this autumnal, we're set in this arts college, so there's just like this constant like Dark Academia autumnal imagery of like libraries and forest and lakes, and yeah, it feels like there's a whole like sepia tone on the entire book. That's how it felt. But for context, what is this book about? It follows a group of friends who are in their final year of college, and they go to this very prestigious arts college. So they are specifically Shakespearean actors in training. Their whole lives circulate around Shakespeare, and they are fighting to be the best of the best. So it's very competitive. They're constantly just head down, working really hard. And the idea of this book is that one of the friends is dead. Okay, there was a death in this final year, and the book starts off trying to go back in time to this final year and piece together what happened or what was happening that led to the death of one of the friend members. Each of the friend groups tends to have a repeated role they play. So no matter what the play is, one of them is always usually the villain, and the other one's always usually the femme fatale, and that kind of thing. And because they're so deeply like steeped in Shakespeare, and that's all they know, and that's all they're really studying, and it kind of is this implied that the role they play on stage is kind of seeping into their actual lives, and it's becoming who they are. And so it's so it has got that theatrical feel, but then a darker element, obviously, because it's like a murder mystery situation. Oh my god. Okay, we're moving on to Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. So if you live under a rock, or for some reason you never read any popular YA dystopian novel, I'm just kidding, it's fine. Essentially, quick note if you don't know what Sunrise on the Reaping is. Sunrise on the Reaping is the second prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. The Hunger Games trilogy came out well over 10 years ago, but it was such an iconic YA dystopian series that got turned into movies, and recently there's been 2 prequels. So the first one was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and this one was the Sunrise on the Reaping. So Songbirds and Snakes follows the villain origin story. So the villain is President Snow, and kind of his one of his earliest Hunger Games that he kind of was a part of, and yeah, his story. And this one follows Hamish Abernathy's Hunger Games. So Hamish, if you are unaware, was one of the only mentor in District 12 for Katniss and Peter. This book is his telling of his games and his experience, and oh my god, I don't know how to talk about this book because it's a Hunger Games book, and I feel like it's pretty well established and well known that we love the world, we love how Suzanne Collins writes characters, and what I loved about this book so much was that we got a world and characters that we've not experienced before. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this feels like that other character in Catching Fire. Like, it definitely felt like a whole new cast of people. And reading Hamish's younger self, you can just, like, we all kind of, I think I could tell, like, he was probably a lot more, well, let's be honest, like, Hamish in The Hunger Games is a shadow of himself. Obviously, he's like an alcoholic for like most of it, and we get these peaks of his real personality, but this was such a, like, before he ever became that version of himself, and it was almost a little bit like, I can see that this is what he was going to be, but it was so fascinating and so much fun to read about all the other people that he was around during his games. There are some other characters that come into this book. I didn't expect it. I'm not going to mention who, but yeah, like younger versions of people we've met in Hunger Games. I was like, I had to pause. I couldn't breathe. It was too much. Obviously, the freaking arena. The arena was spectacular. It made me kind of wonder if Suzanne Collins, like, I wonder if she knew this was Hamish's games, this is what his backstory was before she wrote this book, or did she kind of write it thinking about it right now, like knowing it will be made into a movie, or did she always know his backstory? I don't know if this is like a well-established thing, a thought people have, or something has been published, but I heard this from Jack Edwards, and he said that the first prequel, Songbirds and Snakes, is meant to kind of reflect the Hunger Games book 1. Sunrise on the Reaping is meant to sort of draw on the themes and the feel of Catching Fire, which it does because it has that iconic, it has like a pretty iconic arena, and that spirit of like rebellion is kind of kickstarting in Sunrise on the Reaping. And apparently there should be a third prequel that kind of is linked to Mockingjay. When I heard that, I had to close everything, my laptop, I was just in shock because I did not know that was a thing. That theory killed me. And then how could I not mention we got the trailer? That trailer? Oh my god. Just know I'll be there in cinemas. I'll be there. November next year, I'll be there. Okay, now that we've moved on from that, moving on, what was the next thing I read? Oh, okay. So I read Carrie by Stephen King. It's kind of a shorter book. Actually, I just read it on my iPad, so it felt really short. It felt like a classic. Like I was reading the origins of horror as a genre, but I just enjoyed it. It's such a well-known plot line, the plot of Carrie, and I think it's been kind of done up in it's been used in many different films and shows, and so it's not like it's got that classic feel. It's like, this is the original story of Carrie. I just loved it. I thought it was just so like classic horror, and it was entertaining, it was fast paced, it didn't have like a boring like part where I was just waiting for the book to like get through. It just kept pacing, and I liked Carrie, and the horror element is not that scary. I think I mentioned this in another vlog, but like, I know it's meant to be horror, but it's really not. Like, it's a bit gory, and a bit disturbing, but other than that, I don't think it's that over the top. And for that reason, I think I could enjoy it a lot because it wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't too bad. But yeah, it just felt like a little classic horror story, and I just enjoyed it. Moving on. So I was at this point where I felt like I hadn't read a lot of YA, like dystopian, and I think maybe reading Sunrise on the Reaping had gotten me into that space. So I was like, I wonder if there's any YA dystopian series or books or whatever that I haven't even heard of. And then I came across this book, Scythe by Neil Shusterman. Again, I've been reading this series so long now, but the first book really blew me away. This series is about a post-mortal world. And so humanity, this world we live in, has conquered mortality, and so technology has evolved so much that we basically live forever, and humans, what we do is we get older and older to a certain point, and then technology allows us to turn back. And so we can, as they call it in the book, turn a corner and reset their age down to, I don't know what the youngest age is, I can't remember, maybe like 21 or something. So you can't go back to being a child, but you can go back down to like early 20s. And you can just continue living life. So people in this world have lost track of time. People in this world obviously start multiple families, and so families are just huge. People have many half siblings, and it's very interesting that this is what the post-mortal world looks like. Obviously, we've got to contain population growth, and this is where the concept of scythes come in. And the idea of scythes is that they are trained professionals, so scythes would pick other people to be scythes and so on and so forth, and their job is to glean people, and they can kind of choose however fashion they want to pick people and kill them. But the idea is that it should be spontaneous, and people just have to accept their fate in a way that is like scythes are mimicking real death in the mortal age, where disease was common or people came into accidents, things like that. So that's the premise, and the whole story follows two characters who are they start off as apprentices to become scythes, and we just start this whole adventure of becoming scythes. It does sort of discuss this idea of, I guess, corruption and power, and how does humanity deal with being so technologically advanced. I definitely think it takes a bit of a sci-fi turn, which I personally like sci-fi, so that was great, but I wouldn't say it was like Hunger Games. Like, I wouldn't compare it to Hunger Games. It has a bit more of a different twist, I would say. It was still entertaining. It definitely read YA, but I didn't realize until like I finished the first book, and I was like, oh, that does read a little bit younger, but it was so entertaining and interesting that I didn't really like care. I would say the last book for me was my least favorite. The first half of the book literally was like not entertaining. I wasn't really interested, and the second half was like insanely packed. So yeah, by the end I wasn't obsessed, but that first book I remember loving a lot. So this is a book that I have never heard of, I didn't know anything about. I think I just needed a book to read on my iPad, and I saw it and I was like, okay, why not? And it's called The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart. This is an Australian historical fiction, and it follows our main girl, Alice Hart, who essentially we are thrown into her world as a little girl. She has an extremely abusive father, so that definitely this book is trigger warning central. Please look up the trigger warnings for this book. It's not funny, it's quite serious, and even I was like I would stop breathing every time I'd read some of the scenes. But yes, so she has an extremely abusive father, and certain events happen, and she is forced to then move in with her grandmother, who she's never really met because I think her father is kind of estranged from his mother, so that's why the grandmother has never really met her as a child. But she is forced to live with her and grow up with her grandmother on this flower farm. It reminds me of The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. I mean, it's not anything to do with witches or fantasy, but the idea of following different characters and how these, like women specifically, have gone through these very similar stories of being betrayed or being in hurtful, abusive relationships, and just how that's situation is continuing on from generation to generation. It was just so fascinating, very emotional, like hard-hitting, but a lot of the settings I think are real life places in Australia, and the author did such a good job at describing them and invoking the imagery of the flowers and the meaning of the flowers with what was happening. And it was just so like visually, like what's the word, sensory wise, really good. And the plotline was great as well. I wouldn't say it's the most like up and down, like twists and turns kind of book, but I think it's so emotionally heavy that you are still like engaged, and you just need to know what happens to Alice Hart, you know. And then I discovered it's actually a show on Amazon Prime, so yeah, I started watching. I haven't gotten very far, but I can already tell the casting. Chef's kiss. Whoever the actress that plays the grandmother is exactly how I imagined her to be. I read Today, Tonight, Tomorrow by Rachel Solomon. This was the cutest book. Is it YA? It says YA. This book follows two main characters, girl and boy. I've forgotten their names. I think the boy is called Nick. I've forgotten. But girl and boy, and they are in their final year of high school. Specifically, this book follows them on their last day of school, and they are completing this like challenge quest thing as part of, anyways, the years below put it together to like send off the seniors, like a big like finish. And on this last day are two people, girl and boy, who have spent their whole high school lives hating each other, being academic rivals, have kind of teamed up, and that may lead to a certain conclusion. Obviously it's pretty easy to like guess what happens, but the whole story was so like, I think the way the high school kids were written was really realistic. I mean, it wasn't like my high school or anything, but I felt like a lot more real and normal, and the friendships and the way like the texting was in the book, and they were very mature. I feel like that's what I loved, is like, because these two were kind of, I should stop saying kind of, they are academic rivals. They're very serious. They've spent their whole schooling life just being super serious about school and putting up a lot of sacrifice. And I feel like that was a lot more relatable to me, in terms of like high school wasn't this like huge party where I just like went out every night and just like drank and like, you know what I mean? Like it was a lot more normal, I think, what a lot of kids go through, especially when you're in final year. It was very sweet. It was a sweet book, and I think it continues. It's a series. I'm pretty sure it goes into when they are in college as well. So yeah. So the next book on this list, I cannot believe this is my last one as well. It's my last fiction. I have one non-fiction that I want to mention, but I can't believe this is on the list. It's Fall Thing by Rebecca Yarros. I just was like, I want to know what the hype is about. So yeah, once I heard the premise was about dragons and dragon riders, I just like, I've never actually read a fantasy with dragons. So specifically dragon riders. So I was just like, okay. We follow Violet, starring Gale. She is the main girl in our fantasy world. And this world is sort of like, we're set in a little like city. We're set in a city where when you kind of come of age, which is like 20, most people are enlisted into the army. And there's different, like 4 different factions you can get assigned to. You can choose what you want to do, but there is the scribe quadrant, who are kind of like academics really. You have the riders, who are essentially kind of frontline warriors, if you will. They ride the dragons, they protect the front lines, you get the gist. We've got infantry, who are just the rest of the soldiers, and we've got healers. I'm sure you can gather what they do. So essentially our main girl has been training her whole life to be a scribe. Her father was a scribe. Did I mention her mum is one of the main generals in the army, the main like district they're in. So that's a big deal. So she's grown up in this particular war college. Anyways, she's thought she's going to be a scribe. It turns out her mum said, hell no, that's going to ruin my reputation. You're becoming a dragon rider. And she was like, what? So without any of her choice, she was forced to become an initiate. So this book is covering her trying to become a dragon rider and basically graduate in the Riders Quadrant. I think the things I really loved about this book was the whole setup. Really loved the War College, the different factions, and then the dragons obviously was so breathtaking. Like I really felt the atmosphere whenever the dragons were in the scenes. Obviously, I think the core part was the characters. The characters were just so iconic and again, very divergent feel to them, but that's not really a bad thing. It was good. And I just loved that there was like equal amount of like political drama problems, as well as like, obviously we've got like romantic problems, but then we've got the whole plot of Violet trying to figure out her powers, and I honestly couldn't have told or predicted what was going to happen. I almost am a little bit fearful that we got too much, because now I'm like, what's gonna happen in book 2? We got so many twists, so many turns following. I need to continue the series actually. So many books to read. Okay, I think I have one more book that I want to talk about. Yeah, okay, so the last one I want to talk about is a book I read again a while ago. It was A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. If you don't know, this is a very short little book about, essentially it's a summary, I believe, of a talk that Virginia Woolf gave at Cambridge. And she was tasked to give this lecture about women and fiction. I believe it was like early 1900s, I can't remember the year off the top of my head. Essentially why I loved this summary of a lecture, it was so informative to me. For me, it was just informing me of that time period and where women were, what were women doing, the state of fiction, just how women came to write books and the kind of history before that time and what were women doing and what was the sort of environment women were in. Really like right down to like physical environment, like women probably didn't have like a separate room for them to go and write, so maybe that is what's contributing to them not writing as much, or it's just not encouraged. It's not really like a lot of women were not taught how to read and write at a certain point in time. So kind of like bridging the gap in sort of how women just like never wrote fiction to how do we get to a point where we've started to write, and what do you think is things we need as women to do that. And it was just so fascinating to like read about this time period. As a particular scene that like really gets me is Virginia Woolf was starting out the book, so she's talking about this very specific experience. Remember, she's giving like a talk to students. She's like, I was kind of wanting to research this topic, so I went to the library. Like, this is what she's telling the students, and she says to them how she wasn't allowed in the library at the university unless she had a letter from a gentleman of the university or she was accompanied by another man. And that is crazy to me that the Virginia Woolf couldn't go into a university library and get a book or read or whatever it was unless she had those two things. And it was just such a like, I don't know, like a poignant part of the book to mention that. It was like at the start as well, to really showcase like this is where we're at as society, and this is where we are with women in society and women being in academia and writing. And her whole talk was really about painting a better picture of where we used to be and where we are now and what's happening, what are the changes we need, and what are helpful things, like literally a room, having money so you don't have to feel like you have to get married. And her whole premise is like wanting women to notice that society is changing. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. So that was all of the books that I would say were my favourite books of 2025. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you read any of these and if you liked them too, or if you hated them actually. I'd love to know too. But yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!